Today's video is about noun clauses with if and whether. But before we begin, we need to review the difference between if and whether. I have a lot of students that ask me questions about these words, so we're going to start by talking about the difference between these two words before we look at the noun clause grammar. Let's look at a few examples. If you like baseball, raise your hand. If you are planning to come to the dinner, let me know. If there is a problem, contact the information desk. If it is sunny, if there is wind, or if snow is in the forecast, we will still go on a hike. In each of these examples, you can see the if clause, which is the first one in these. You could also rearrange it. As we know, you can put the dependent clause second, but to highlight the grammar here, we can see that if is the dependent clause, if you like baseball, and then the result clause and the main clause is raise your hand. For most students, this grammar is not difficult to understand. This is called conditional grammar. We will also go over this later in the semester, but it's called conditional because the result and the main clause is dependent on the condition or the situation. If you like baseball, then you will raise your hand. So raise your hand is the result of if you like baseball. If not, then you won't raise your hand. So this main clause depends on the condition or the situation of the if clause. And we can see that there's an if in each of these. We can also see in the last one that there are multiple ifs. If it is sunny, if there is wind, or if snow is in the forecast. If any of these things happen, the result is we will still go on a hike. So none of these really affect the result, but there could be multiple different situations. Let's take a look at these examples. I will help you if you want me to. They will exchange the item for a new item if there is a defect or a problem. Most people are willing to help if you ask nicely. In each of these, again, we can see an if clause, that dependent clause. It's second in each of those. So I will help you if you want me to. They will exchange the item for a new item if there is a defect or a problem. Most people are always willing to help if you ask nicely. If we look at the same example with whether, it actually changes the feeling. Whether gives us two options, and it kind of narrows it down to yes or no. I must help you whether you want me to or not. And whether in this case actually shows if you want it or if you don't want it, both will have the same result. In the first one on the left, we can see, if we look at this one, I will help you if you want me to. That means if you want me to, if yes, then I will help you. In this one, if you want me to or if you don't want me to, I must help you. If we look at this on the right, if there's a defect or a problem, then they will exchange the item for a new item. This sentence says they will exchange the item for a new item whether there is a defect or a problem or not. So in this case, the whether shows us if there's a problem or if there's not, they will still allow you to exchange the item. Most people are willing to help if you ask nicely. Some people are not willing to help whether you ask nicely or not. In this case, or not is optional in all of these sentences. The grammar word whether actually gives us this yes and no option, and sometimes we put more emphasis by adding or not at the end. But if we look at this example right here, some people are not willing to help you, or some people will not help you if you ask nicely or if you do not ask nicely. This result clause, not willing to help, is the same. Oops, this is the wrong button. So again, to review, if, the word if tells us that there are multiple options. If it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's windy, we could have multiple options. The dependent clause, this is a dependent clause, it's a conditional clause, and the result depends on if the situation is true. When we use whether, the word whether actually comes from which of either. There are only two options, so if there are more than two, we cannot use the word whether. It is also a dependent clause. And the result is the same no matter which option happens. So if it is, whether it is rainy or sunny, we will go on a hike. That tells me there are two options. It might be rainy, it might be sunny. And it does not matter which one is true, the result is the same. But if I say, if it is rainy, we will not go on a hike, or if it is sunny, we will go on a hike, that tells me that it could be sunny, or as we all know in Colorado, it could be snowing, it could be hailing, it could be windy. There are all kinds of different types of weather, and so we choose the word if because there are multiple options. So going back to our grammar book, this is in our green supplement book, Grammar Grad 3 supplement. It's the green one. And this is coming from Grammar and Beyond, Level 3. We're looking at Unit 16, and we're on page 32 in our supplement, 32. Noun clauses with if and whether. If we look at the grammar presentation, it says noun clauses can begin with if or whether. These noun clauses are similar in some ways to yes and no, but they follow the statement word order. This is the same rule as we had with our WH question, noun clauses. It's not a real question, so it follows sentence order instead of question order. Let's take a look at the example. I'm not sure if the Wright brothers invented the airplane, or maybe if it was someone else. He doesn't know whether we will get the money for our experiment. To make an if or whether noun clause, we follow all the rules that we have already reviewed about noun clauses. Use statement word order, subject and verb, for a noun clause with if and whether. It is not a question, so we use sentence order. I don't know if plus the public will accept our idea. So this is our subject, the public. Will accept is our verb. We need the verb after the subject, as we do in all sentence grammar. I don't know whether Edison really invented the light bulb. Edison is our subject, invented is our verb, so we need our subject before our verb. You can use the words or not at the end of both if and whether clauses. So this or not at the end is optional. The scientist didn't know if you would understand her invention. The scientist didn't know if you would understand her invention or not. And remember, you can use if or whether, but you must choose one. Or not can immediately follow whether, but it cannot immediately follow the word if. Let's take a look. The scientist didn't know whether or not you would understand her invention. In this case, we can move this or not directly after the word whether, but it cannot move directly after the word if. That is because this word whether gives us two options, so it's whether or not. And we can put it right here. But we cannot do that with if because if sometimes gives us more than one option. You can use if and whether to introduce two options. You can use if to introduce if there are more than two options. Whether only tells us two options. So you might want to make a note right here to explain that a little bit more clearly. If can introduce more than two options, and whether only tells us two options. It's usually whether yes or whether no. We don't know whether the new phone or the new tablet will come out first. So it's the new phone or the new tablet. You can use noun clauses with if and whether after the following verbs. Verbs like decide, know, and remember. For example, I haven't decided if I'm going to write a report about the Wright brothers. Let's take a look. I'm going to write another example right here. I haven't decided whether I'm going to write a report about the Wright brothers. So most grammar books tell you that if and whether are the exact same in our noun clauses. However, I'd like to point out the difference in meaning between these two sentences. In the first one, I haven't decided if I'm going to write a report about the Wright brothers. In the second one, I haven't decided whether I'm going to write a report about the Wright brothers. In this one, I chose the word if because maybe I will write a report about the Wright brothers, or maybe I will write a report about Edison, or maybe I will write a report about Obama, or, so I have multiple options. And in this one, we can feel that this is one option out of many. In this one, we have whether, and so because there are two options here, it feels a little bit more like I'm going to write about the Wright brothers or I'm not going to write. I haven't decided whether to write about the Wright brothers or not. So the options are to write or not. In this one, if I'm going to write about the Wright brothers or if I'm going to write about Obama or about, I don't know, Malala or whomever. So in this one, it feels like we are introducing that there are multiple possibilities, and this one it feels like yes or no. I'm going to write about the Wright brothers, yes or no. Okay, sorry, moving back. Learning and perception, you can figure out or find out something, and you can use it after emotions like care, doubt, matter, mind. They doubted whether anyone would steal their idea or not. Let's take a look at the next page. Using noun clauses. You can also use noun clauses with whether after verbs and prepositions including care about, decide on, find out about, forget about, and so on. This is the same rule that we have already reviewed in our other units on noun clauses, that a noun clause can be the object of a preposition. You should forget about whether you'll make a lot of money with that invention. Be careful, it says that you should not use if after a preposition. So you can only use the word whether. You should forget about whether. And so when we have a preposition, whether is the best word to choose, the only option, because about if doesn't work together. That's because if sounds like maybe, and whether is one of two options. And so forget about something. We need something that functions a little bit more as a firm noun and not just a possibility, a condition. You can use an infinitive with whether. You cannot use an infinitive with if. He didn't know whether to share his discovery, which is, we reviewed this. He didn't know whether he should share his discovery. We reviewed this in our previous unit on reducing noun clauses. So if you have the same subject, sometimes you can reduce. But this one, it says you cannot reduce with the word if. He didn't know if to share. If and to also cannot go together. So when you use the word if, you must have your full clause. You need your subject and your verb. Let's look at the data from the real world. Noun clauses with if are much more frequent than noun clauses with whether. Whether is more frequent in writing than speaking. Let's take a look. Grammar 3.1. Exercise 3.1, forming noun clauses with if and whether. It says combine the sentences. Use a noun clause with if or whether. Sometimes more than one answer is possible. Sometimes we can use if or we can use whether. And at other times, according to the rules and the meaning, we must choose if or we must choose the word whether. So please complete that for home practice tonight.